Hey YouTube, welcome back to the channel. With Friday being the official release of ST08 Luffy and ST09 Yamato, I wanted to go through the decks and discuss my thoughts on the decks and whether there would be a shift in the meta. Whether there's any cards in the deck that could help introduce new decks or make certain decks meta contenders. So this video is going to be dedicated to ST09 Luffy, and then within the next day or two I will have the Yamato deck review up on the channel. Okay, and let's start the video. So first we're going to start with Luffy. So Luffy says when a character is KO'd, give one of your rested Dawn cards to this leader. So from a card design, when we compare this to the red Luffy, I just think this card is significantly worse. This card is only better in the situations where you are KOing more than one character in a turn. Yes, we do have the introduction of the new Shanks card, so I do see the synergy there. But outside of that one card, I don't feel that this is, compared to the red Luffy, this is just a worse leader. Now when we compare it to other black leaders, I also still feel that it falls short. So when we compare it to Smoker can give one of our opponent's characters a reduction, which can help us KO it with cards like Sakazuki. Or it can also reduce a 1 cost to 0, and then we gain an extra 1,000 attack. So then our leader is swinging for 7 for the addition of 1 Dawn. Then when we compare it to Rob Lucci has a CP9 tag, which helps it get access to better cards and just a bigger black pool. So it has Air Door, and it also has Spanda, which is not something that other decks can currently play, since that's the only CP9 leader. So overall, I don't see this leader seeing much play in black, just because I do feel like there are better black leaders. Okay, next we're going to move on to Uta. So Uta is a 2/3 that has a free reduction every turn. And there's two main important things about Uta. So the first one is that it can't be KO'd in battle by a leader, which allows us to use it in situations where either one, our opponent has a clear board and we know that it can't be KO'd, or two, our opponent has stronger characters, so maybe like a 7k or a 6k, and instead of swinging for our leader, they're swinging into an Uta. Also, it is very interesting that there might be a situation where you play Uta onto an open board and your opponent has no characters, and then you can put 2 Dawn on Uta and have it swing, and you know that next turn it can't be KO'd. Well, by attacks at least. The second important thing about Uta is that it has the film tag. So up to now we haven't had black cards with the film tag, so this can help introduce new strategies. One along the lines of playing Z. So Z is purple black, so that means that they have access to Buena Fiesta, so you're able to search the Uta. Now I don't know if this is quite viable into this current meta, but I do think it's interesting that certain tags that were only searchable for one color, and then when we have an introduction of a new color that has that same tag, we can now play dual color leaders to search cards that are typically not searchable within their color. So basically this card is never searchable in the black deck, but now when we play black purple, it is searchable. So I think that's very, very cool. Okay. Okay, next we have Gallimon. It's just a vanilla, there's not much for me to say there. Next we have Kobe. I do like the design of Kobe. So Kobe says you may rest this character, KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. So I do like that black is getting cards that can be removals every turn, and they don't require a discard. But at the same time, with Kobe's stat line, it's basically a one-time use, which I don't like. But I do like the direction that maybe in the future we will be getting cards that are stronger. So for example, just if Kobe was a 6'6" or a 6'5", it would just be something that we can protect, and it's a threat. Here, a 4'1", it can be KO'd almost by every character in the game, any searcher. So yeah. Next we have Shanks. Shanks is probably one of the more impactful cards that we're getting out of this deck. It says trash one card from your hand, KO all characters with a cost of 1 or less. So a couple of things. Number one, Shanks can KO your own characters, so you do have to be careful when you play it. It doesn't just KO your opponent's characters. Number two, it is interesting that it does, in a situation where you are able to KO multiple characters, it does trigger your leader Luffy. So let's say you KO'd 4 characters, 2 on your side, 2 on your opponent's side. Luffy would become a 9k on the same turn you played Shanks, which is interesting. Now, my criticisms for the card are just that it feels too fair. I feel like I am playing a 9-drop to KO 1-cost cards. When I'm playing a 9-drop, I typically want it to be more impactful than killing 1-drops. Yes, you are able to pair with other cards, which we're going to go over, to make it better, so that on 9 or on 10, 10 being the curve black usually wants to be on, the even curve, the card is much stronger. But I don't like the fact that it's essentially costing me 3 cards, right? Like, I'm playing a card, I'm discarding a card, and then I'm using a card to set it up. So that's what I mean by it's too fair of a card. On the bright side, it is good against Zoro, so something that is a more aggressive deck, being able to play it. Some decks struggle to play big cards on 9 and 10 because they'll just be rushed out. So it's nice that you can play this on 9 and KO maybe a board of weenies. And then next, I just want to go over the cards that can help Shanks be very good on curve, whether that's 9 Dawn or 10 Dawn. So first, we're going to talk about Ellis Island and Navy HQ. These aren't cards that are typically played, but it is something to consider if you want Shanks to be just like, if you revolve your deck around Shanks, these are cards you can consider, with Ellis Island just being much stronger. Navy HQ is an option if you are playing a leader that is a Navy, but playing a CP leader just is much stronger just because of the -2. So being able to KO a 3-drop and then a 1-drop at the very minimum feels very strong. Next we have Kuzan. So you can have Kuzan in play, and then on 9 or 10 you swing with Kuzan and then you play Shanks. So then you're KOing a 5-drop and a 1-drop. There's typically always a searcher on board. That's why I'm assuming that we are also KOing 1-drop. So that does make Shanks a bit stronger. Next we have Great Eruption. This card typically isn't played, but on 10 Dawn, if you play this to replace itself and then you play Shanks, you can KO a 3 and a 1. I'm more just going through all the options. I don't think this is quite viable. So far, I think 4-drop Kuzan is the best option, and then if you want to attempt the stages, you can. Then you can play Tusuru. Yeah, it's always a solid card. If there's something you want to KO, it's worth playing, but with the 0 stat line, it never swings, and most of the time it's just going to be a 2k. But it is an option that is already in your deck, and you don't have to change your deck to include it. Those are the main ones. We have a card like Tashigi, but typically you would really never play this onto a board and just have it stay there. It's just a very weak turn to play Tashigi onto the board. And then again, we also have Tashigi. I'm more giving you these options so you guys can, just theories to see if you guys find something that you like. But for the most part, I do think the Tashigis are just not really playable in the sense of helping Shanks. You can play a 2k for a 2k, but this card has almost never seen play. And you would just play Kuzan over it. I really don't see a situation where you play both this and Kuzan at 4. And then finally, the option I think is the most viable and just the strongest is 10-drop Kuzan. So My theory for Shanks is that you play you don't play Shanks on 9, and then you just play the Kuzan. And then once you have the Kuzan up, everything is reduced by 5. And now you can play Shanks. And Shanks will KO anything that's 6 or less. And then if you have 2 Kuzans, Kuzan only decreases your opponent's card. So then this card becomes a board wipe every single turn. Will you have 2 Kuzans? Probably not, but still being able to KO 6 or less every time you drop a Shanks is very, very strong. So in the future, I might try this deck just for fun, but a deck that plays 4 Kuzan and 4 Shanks, and the idea is just to drop a Kuzan followed by Shanks, or even just Kuzan into Kuzan. Has always just been very strong. So Shanks is just like a follow-up card. And then one last thing, I did forget to mention Soap Sheep. I was going through all the options. Realistically, you don't play this card, but it is nice that if you are playing a high Shanks count, on 10 you can play Soap Sheep, reduce 2 3s to 1 drops, and then KO 2 3 drops and a 1 drop. Just thought I'd mention it. From there, we have Shirahoshi. So my pros for the card are that I do like cards that have a dual purpose in black for reductions as well as doing something else. So something like Kuzan is a perfect example. You get to draw a card, and when it swings, you do a -4. It is a little slower when it comes to the reduction. So something like this where you can reduce immediately and then it has another ability are great, having the blocker tag. At the same time, the 0 stat line into this meta is just not playable. There's so many cards that KO this. Also, it being a 4 drop, it can be KO'd by black. Being 0, it gets KO'd by a lot of red cards. I've seen Vistas, Marcos, Fire Fist. So I do think that this card maybe can see play in the future if reductions become more important. But for this meta, I just don't see this card seeing much play. We have Vivi. This is just a trigger blocker. So now we have yellow, black, and blue all have trigger blockers. Blue's trigger blocker almost never saw play. Yellow's trigger blocker has started to phase out. There are a few winning lists that don't play the trigger blocker. I forget the name of it at the moment. And then now we have Vivi. So I think the same will happen. We just won't see this in black decks. Higama, same effect as Tusuru, but it's not a 2K. It being a 1/2 does give it some flexibility because it can swing, but at the same time, you're not going to put 3 Dawn on this for black to swing. So realistically, this card doesn't see play in my opinion. Next, we have Makino. I think Makino is an interesting card. It is just a 2K, 99% of the time. But it is nice that if you're digging for a specific card, and there is a 0 cost, you can play it and draw a card. But realistically, there are a lot of 2Ks for black. So whether this is one of the ones that you include in your deck, I think will be preference. I do think it's interesting in the future if we're playing a black-green deck, and then you can play this, draw a card, and then play Law to bounce it back and have a 2K. But as far as current meta, it's just a 2K. It's a vanilla 2K 99% of the time. Then we have the vanillas. So we have Garp, Luffy, Laboon. In my opinion, these cards are just unplayable. We have enough vanilla black cards, and they have the CP9 tag, which means that they can be brought back. They can be summoned off air door. I don't think you play these. Then we have number 2, Mr. Bond. I think this card is interesting, being able to swing into, a 10 drop or just something that's very well statted, and then you KO both characters. I do want to remind you guys that if he dies within the attack, then he doesn't get to trigger his effect. So either you would have to guard him very strongly, or you would have to be the one declaring the attack. I think it's an interesting card. I probably wouldn't play this card in my deck just because it's too slow of a card and it doesn't have counter. But I do think that it is very interesting into these decks that just play very strong statted cards. So like yellow has a lot of 10 drops and 8 drops and 7 drops. So this is just an interesting card. And then finally we just have the 2 events. So first we have Gun Gun Bell. I don't think that playing an event where you reduce a character by 7 and lose a life is great value. So I would strongly pass on this card. I just wouldn't play it. And then I don't think the trigger entices me to play the card either, just getting a card back from the trash. And then the last card in the deck, we have Gun Gun Pistol. Black has tons of cards like this, and at 3 costs, I just don't think it's worth it. I feel like this should be an ability that's on a character for a similar cost, not something that you just play for 3 and you don't build onto the board. And those are all the cards in the deck. So I'm mainly just excited about the Uta and the Shanks. Don't see it changing the meta at the moment, but I would love to be proven wrong. And if anyone thought of any cool and consistent strategies with the cards in the deck, please comment them below. I would love to see them. And that's the video. So if you've made it this long, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thank you.